Emma lived in a small, peaceful neighborhood nestled on the edge of a sleepy town. The houses were modest, each with their own garden full of blooming flowers or children's toys scattered across the lawns. The streets were quiet, a kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and life seemed to move at a slower pace. Every afternoon after school, Emma would play in her front yard, her only companion being her loyal dog, Max. He was a large, sturdy German shepherd with a thick, golden coat and eyes full of wisdom. Max wasn't just any dog, he was a true protector, a canine trained by Emma's father when he was a police officer. But to Emma, he was simply her best friend, her confidant, and the one creature who understood her without words. It was a bright afternoon in early spring when everything changed. The sky was cloudless, a perfect shade of blue, and the air smelled faintly of fresh grass and blossoming trees. Emma was sitting on the front porch, sketching pictures of Max and imagining adventures in far-off places. Max lay at her feet, his head resting on his paws, his ears occasionally twitching at the sounds of birds overhead. Everything seemed peaceful calm, until the roar of motorcycle engines shattered the tranquility. Emma's head snapped up, and her heart skipped a beat as a group of bikers turned the corner at the end of the street. Their motorcycles revved loudly, breaking the quiet air and sending a wave of noise that rattled the windows of the houses. The bikers didn't slow down as they zoomed past Emma's house. Instead, they seemed to take pleasure in the attention they were getting, their bikes growling like wild beasts. The riders were clad in black leather, their faces partially obscured by bandanas and helmets, but their tattoos and rough demeanor left little to the imagination. Max immediately lifted his head, his body tense, and his ears perked up. Emma could feel the change in the air. Max wasn't the type of dog to be easily startled, but there was something about the loud engines and the way the bikers moved that made him uneasy. Emma, however, didn't think much of it at first. She had never been afraid of bikers, and she had seen the motorcycles pass through the neighborhood before. It was just another group of strangers, right? As the bikers circled back around, one of them, the biggest of the group, slowed his bike and turned toward Emma's house. He stopped in front of her yard, revving his engine loudly for no reason other than to show off. The sound made Emma flinch, and she instinctively took a step back. Max growled low in his throat, a warning to the stranger, but Emma was still unaware of the danger looming. She stood there, unsure of what to make of the situation, her grip tightening on her sketchbook as she watched the biker approach. The biker removed his helmet, revealing a scar running down his cheek, his eyes sharp and filled with mischief. He tilted his head as he sized Emma up, a cruel smirk appearing on his face. "Well, look at this," he sneered. "A little girl with her little dog. What are you doing out here, sweetheart? Shouldn't you be inside playing with dolls or something?" Emma's stomach tightened at his tone, and she instinctively took a step backward. She didn't like the way he looked at her, and Max's growl grew louder, a clear sign that he didn't like the biker's presence either. Yet Emma felt unsure of how to respond. She didn't want to seem scared, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The biker didn't wait for a response. Instead, he nudged his bike forward, blocking her path. "What's your dog gonna do, Pa?" he taunted, pointing at Max. "Bet he's just a big baby. Look at those floppy ears. What kind of guard dog is that?" Emma swallowed hard, her heart racing as the biker continued to mock her. Max stayed by her side, his stance protective but calm, as if waiting for her to give him a command. The other bikers watched from a distance, laughing among themselves, enjoying the scene unfolding in front of them. Emma couldn't understand why they were being so mean. Max wasn't a threat to anyone, and neither was she. They were just trying to enjoy their afternoon. So why were these strangers being so cruel? As the biker took another step forward, Emma's pulse quickened, and she instinctively placed her hand on Max's head, reassuring him without words. Max's eyes never left the biker, his body coiled like a spring, ready to protect his young owner at a moment's notice. The tension in the air thickened as the biker's laughter echoed through the neighborhood. Emma couldn't shake the uneasy feeling crawling up her spine. What started as an innocent encounter was quickly turning into something far more dangerous. and she had no idea just how much trouble was headed her way. Emma stood frozen, unsure of what to do. The biker was getting closer, his leather boots thudding against the ground with each step. Max's growl deepened, the sound vibrating through the air. Emma could feel the tension building in her chest as the biker towered over her, a wicked smirk curling on his lips. "Come on, sweetheart," the biker sneered, crouching down to her level. "What's your dog gonna do? Sit there and look cute." He waved a hand in front of Max's face, teasing the dog with his fingers. Max's eyes locked on the biker's hand, his tail stiffening. Emma's heart beat faster, a mix of confusion and fear swirling inside her. She had never seen anyone treat Max this way, and she didn't know how to react. Should she speak up? Should she tell him to leave? Max, as if sensing her unease, took a step forward, his muscles tensing. Emma reached down and placed a hand on his head, trying to calm him, but her voice trembled when she spoke. "Please stop," she said quietly, though she wasn't sure if the biker would even listen. The biker ignored her. "What's wrong, girl? You scared of a little fun?" he taunted. His voice was laced with mockery, and the other bikers, now idling nearby, started laughing. They leaned against their bikes, enjoying the spectacle as the man continued to torment Emma and Max. "Bet you couldn't even get your dog to do anything. I'd seen better dogs at the shelter," the biker continued, his words sharp like daggers. He stretched out his hand again, this time reaching toward Max's collar. Max's eyes narrowed, his body rigid, but he didn't move. He knew his job. He was trained to protect, to wait for the right moment before acting. Emma's chest tightened, the anxiety growing as the biker's fingers brushed against Max's collar. In a way, it felt as if time had slowed. Emma glanced at the other bikers, who were still laughing, their eyes glinting with amusement. They had no idea who Max really was. They thought he was just an ordinary dog, a harmless, goofy pet. But they were wrong. Emma wasn't sure what to expect, but she felt a deep sense of unease, as if she was standing on the edge of something dangerous. "Ah, look at that," the biker said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "The little dog's too scared to do anything. You should get him some training, girl. He looks like a failure." Max's low growl intensified, reverberating through the air. The tension in the neighborhood was palpable now, and Emma's hand tightened around Max's collar. She looked up at him, his dark eyes steady and calm. She could feel his energy building, his body still, as if waiting for a signal. But Emma couldn't give him that signal. She wasn't sure if she was ready for whatever was about to happen. She didn't know if Max would do what he was trained to do, but one thing was clear. The biker was pushing him, and her, too far. Emma swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. Her thoughts raced, but all she could do was watch as the situation unfolded before her. The biker, now fully convinced he had control over the situation, smirked and took another step forward. "Maybe I'll teach your dog a lesson myself." His hand reached out again, this time aiming to grab Max by the collar. That's when the unthinkable happened. Max moved. Fast. The moment the biker's hand touched Max's collar, everything changed. Emma's breath caught in her throat as Max's entire body seemed to snap into action, his muscles coiling like a spring, ready to explode. The biker's hand never made it past the collar. In an instant, Max was on him, his powerful body knocking the biker off balance and sending him stumbling backward. Max's jaws snapped shut around the biker's arm with controlled force, not enough to harm, but enough to make him realize just how serious the situation had become. The biker let out a yelp of shock, his tough exterior shattering in the face of the canine's swift, precise reaction. He tried to pull away, but Max held him firmly, pinning him to the ground with ease. The other bikers froze, their laughter dying in their throats. For a brief moment, the only sound was the growl of Max, deep and menacing, as he kept his grip on the biker's arm. Emma stood frozen, her hands trembling, eyes wide. She had never seen Max act like this before. Yes, she knew he was trained to protect, but this was different. Max was no longer the playful dog who would roll on the grass and chase after sticks. He was a force of nature, reacting in an instant to defend her. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she realized just how much danger they were in, and just how capable Max was. "Max, stop!" Emma cried, her voice sharp with panic. She rushed forward, her hands reaching out. But before she could get too close, Max released the biker's arm and took a step back, never breaking eye contact with him. The biker scrambled to his feet, a look of fear in his eyes that Emma had never expected to see on someone so tough-looking. His face was pale, and his breathing was ragged as he quickly backed away from Max, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Dan," one of the other bikers muttered, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. The biker who had been knocked down stood there, rubbing his arm, clearly shaken but too proud to admit how terrified he really was. He shot a glance at his friends, looking for support, but none of them moved. They were all too stunned to speak. Max, still poised and alert, remained by Emma's side. His tail was stiff, his eyes scanning the bikers as if daring them to make another move. Emma's hands were still shaking, but she felt a strange sense of relief wash over her. Max had protected her. He had acted without hesitation, instinctively knowing what to do in the moment. But now, as the biker stood there, trembling slightly, Emma's mind raced. She had no idea how to handle this situation. These weren't just random strangers. These were bikers, people who didn't seem afraid of anything. And yet they were afraid now. "What the hell is wrong with you?" the biker with the scar on his cheek demanded, his voice low and angry. He glared at Emma as if it was somehow her fault. "You let your damn dog attack me." He rubbed his arm, trying to hide the pain, but the fear was still there, lingering in his eyes. Emma opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She had never seen anyone react like this to Max before. She had always known her dog was special, but seeing the bikers back off so quickly made her realize just how powerful he really was. It was as though they'd underestimated him, underestimated both of them, and now they were paying the price. The leader of the group, the man who had first approached Emma, took a step forward, his expression now serious. He looked from Emma to Max, his gaze calculating, before shaking his head slowly. "We didn't know," he muttered under his breath. Then louder he added, "We didn't know your dog was trained. We thought he was just some pet." Max didn't move, but Emma could see the pride in his stance. He wasn't just any pet. He was a trained canine, and he had done exactly what he was meant to do, protect his owner. The other bikers started to murmur among themselves, their previous bravado now gone. The tension in the air was thick, and Emma felt her stomach knot with uncertainty. They were clearly rattled. But Emma also knew that Max's reaction had been instinctual. He had protected her without a second thought. "Just go," Emma said, her voice trembling but firm. "Please, just leave." The bikers, now realizing they had pushed too far, exchanged glances. There was no more laughter, no more taunting. Slowly, they began to mount their bikes, one by one, the sound of engines starting up filling the quiet street. As they revved their engines and prepared to leave, Emma finally exhaled, the weight of the moment lifting off her shoulders. Max stood by her side, his posture still strong, watching as the bikers rode away, their tires kicking up dust as they disappeared down the road. Emma couldn't believe what had just happened. She had never been in a situation like this before, and her heart was still racing. But Max had been there. He had protected her when it mattered most. As the last of the bikes vanished from sight, Emma knelt down and wrapped her arms around Max's neck, hugging him tightly. "Thank you, Max," she whispered, feeling tears well in her eyes. She didn't know how to put into words just how grateful she was. But in that moment, she didn't have to. Max already knew. The roar of the motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving the neighborhood in a tense silence. Emma stood there, her body still trembling, her hands gripping Max's fur. Her heart pounded in her chest, the adrenaline of the moment still rushing through her veins. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. But as the sounds of the bikers' engines grew quieter, a strange sense of calm began to settle over her. Max had done what he was trained to do. He had protected her. She wasn't alone. But even as she tried to breathe in the peace of the moment, something still lingered in the air, something Emma couldn't quite put her finger on. Max, too, was on edge, his ears swiveling back and forth as he scanned the street. His stance was more alert than she had ever seen it before, as if he were waiting for something more to happen. Emma, still kneeling beside him, glanced down at her dog. She could see it in his eyes. He wasn't relaxed. He was still waiting, watching. Her own sense of unease grew again, creeping up her spine, as if the threat wasn't completely gone. Max's protective instincts had kicked in the moment the bikers approached, but they had also been sharp ever since. He wasn't the type of dog to growl or show aggression unless it was absolutely necessary. The fact that he had done so today meant something. It meant that, deep down, he knew there was danger still lurking. Emma's thoughts were interrupted by a voice, soft but urgent, calling out from behind her. "Is everything okay?" She spun around quickly, her heart leaping into her throat. It was her father, standing in the doorway of their house. He had been watching from the window all along, and now he stepped outside, concern etched across his face. His eyes darted to the empty street, then to Max, who was still standing tall and watchful by Emma's side. "Yeah, I think so," Emma replied, her voice still shaky. She stood up slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "They just left, Dad." Her father walked over, glancing at the direction the bikers had gone. His eyes narrowed, a look of worry crossing his face. "You didn't try to handle them on your own, did you, Emma?" He crouched down next to her, his expression softening as he looked at her. "No, Dad," she said quickly, shaking her head. "It was Max. He just knew what to do." Her father looked at Max, then back at Emma. His gaze softened with pride, though a flicker of something darker passed across his eyes. "I'm glad Max was there, but you need to be careful. You never know when people like that might come back." Emma nodded, understanding the gravity of what her father was saying. She had never considered what could have happened if Max hadn't stepped in, if the bikers had kept pushing. The thought sent a chill down her spine. Her father reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Come inside, sweetheart. We'll talk more in there." Emma followed her father into the house, her heart still racing. Max trotted close behind, never straying far from her side. As they stepped inside, her father locked the door behind them, his movements quick and deliberate. Emma didn't speak as they moved to the kitchen. She didn't need to. The tension still hung in the air like a storm waiting to break, but neither of them spoke of it. Her father turned to her, his expression more serious now. "What exactly happened, Emma? You were out here playing, and then the bikers showed up. Did they say anything to you before?" Emma sat at the kitchen table, folding her hands in her lap. She could still hear the bikers' mocking words echoing in her mind, their laughter ringing in her ears. They were just being rude. They said stuff about Max, and then one of them tried to grab his collar. She paused, her voice catching in her throat. Max didn't like that. He just reacted. Her father nodded, his eyes growing darker. "I know Max is well trained, but I need you to understand something. Emma, there are people in this world who won't stop at a little teasing. Some people, when they see an opportunity, they'll push it. You can't always predict how things will go. Max is a great dog, and he's got your back, but you've got to be aware of the risks." Emma felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She understood what he was saying, but it felt so far removed from the innocent world she had always known. The world she lived in felt safe until now. "I didn't want Max to get hurt," Emma said softly, staring at her hands. "I just wanted to play." Her father crouched down to her level, his voice soft but firm. "And Max doesn't mind protecting you. But you have to be prepared, Emma. I want you to stay aware. You can't let your guard down, not when there are people out there who will take advantage of a situation. No one knows what tomorrow might bring." Emma nodded, though her heart still felt heavy. Max, sensing the change in the air, rested his head on her lap, as if to say everything would be okay. He had been her protector for years, and in that moment, Emma realized just how much she needed to rely on him. But she also knew her father was right. The world wasn't always as safe as she thought it was. And next time she might not have Max there to protect her. The next few days passed without incident, but the unease never fully left Emma. She tried to return to her normal routine, going to school and playing in the yard with Max, but the memory of the bikers lingered in her mind like a shadow. Every time she heard the roar of a motorcycle in the distance, her heart would race, and Max would stiffen, his eyes scanning the road for any sign of trouble. It was as if they were both waiting for something to happen, as if the bikers hadn't truly gone away. Emma's father kept a close watch over her, always making sure she was safe, but he was also distant, as if something was weighing on his mind. He didn't talk about it, but Emma could see the way his eyes would narrow whenever a motorcycle passed by. It wasn't like him to be so on edge. She began to wonder if her father knew something more, something she didn't understand, but she didn't dare ask. Not yet. One evening, about a week after the bikers had left, Emma was sitting on the porch, drawing in her sketchbook while Max rested beside her. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the yard, and the evening air was cool and quiet. It was the kind of peaceful moment she had longed for in the days following the encounter. But as the sky darkened, she heard it, the unmistakable sound of motorcycle engines. Emma's stomach twisted into knots. She didn't look up immediately, but Max's ears pricked up, his body going rigid beside her. He knew. She could feel it. The sound grew louder, closer, and she felt a wave of panic rise in her chest. Max stood up, his muscles tense, his eyes locked on the street as the motorcycles approached. Emma's breath quickened as she finally looked up, her heart sinking when she saw them. 3 motorcycles turning the corner at the end of the street. The same bikers. The same leather jackets and tattoos. They were back. This time, they didn't slow down. The lead biker, the one with the scar, revved his engine as he neared her house. The noise made Emma's pulse race, and she instinctively stepped back, her hands gripping her sketchbook so tightly her knuckles turned white. She wanted to run inside, to hide behind her father, but she knew better than that. Max was already on alert, standing in front of her, his stance protective and unyielding. The bikers slowed down as they reached the driveway, the same man with the scar in the lead. He looked directly at Emma, his expression unreadable. This time, there was no mocking, no teasing. Instead, there was something darker in his eyes, something that made Emma's stomach churn. "Looks like we've got unfinished business," the biker said, his voice rough and cold. He kicked his bike into neutral and climbed off, the others following suit. "We didn't get a chance to talk last time." Max's growl started low, a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground. His hackles were raised, his eyes trained on the bikers as they dismounted, circling around her yard. Emma felt a jolt of fear shoot through her, but she stood her ground. She could hear the blood pounding in her ears. The bikers hadn't said much that day, but now it felt like they were circling, looking for a reason to cause trouble. "What do you want?" Emma asked, her voice shakier than she wanted it to be. The biker with the scar stepped forward, his eyes scanning her face, his expression unreadable. "We came back to apologize," he said, though his tone was anything but sincere. "We were out of line last time. Didn't mean to get your dog worked up. Just wanted to make sure everything's cool between us now." Emma didn't believe him. She knew better. The way he spoke, the way the others were watching her, made it clear this wasn't about an apology. Something was off. "I don't want any trouble," Emma replied, keeping her voice as steady as she could. Max's growl grew louder, and the biker's eyes flicked to the dog. There was a hesitation, but only for a moment. Then he sneered. "See, that's the thing, kid. It's not really about what you want," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "It's about what we want." Emma's heart skipped a beat as the other bikers began to circle closer. Max, sensing her fear, moved between her and the bikers, his body tense and ready. Emma's hands shook, but she refused to back down. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, a surge of courage rushing through her. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Max, and she wasn't going to let them hurt him. "Leave us alone," she said firmly, her voice shaking less with each word. The biker with the scar smirked, but there was no humor in it. "We'll leave, kid, but remember, you don't always get to decide who stays or who goes." The others laughed darkly as they mounted their bikes once more, revving their engines loudly, making the ground tremble beneath Emma's feet. But she stood still, her eyes locked on them, knowing they hadn't gone for good. They would be back. As they rode off, Max stayed by Emma's side, his eyes never leaving the road. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something worse was on the horizon. Something was coming, and it was only a matter of time before the bikers would make their move. She had a feeling that they weren't just after her, they were after something much bigger, something she couldn't see yet, and she had no idea how to stop it. The bikers' visit left a lingering sense of dread in the air, even as they disappeared down the road. Emma stood frozen, her eyes locked on the empty street, the echo of their engines still vibrating in her chest. Max remained close, his gaze fixed on the horizon, his body rigid and tense. It was as if the calm that had followed their departure was nothing but an illusion. Emma didn't know what to do. Her father had been quiet since the bikers left, watching from the window with an expression that said more than words ever could. He hadn't made a move to confront them, and he hadn't spoken much either, but Emma knew he was just as unsettled as she was. There was something about the way the bikers had acted, something cold and calculating, that made her think they weren't done. Not by a long shot. Max seemed to sense it too. His usual relaxed demeanor had vanished. He stayed close to Emma, his body tense, his eyes constantly scanning the yard. Emma had never seen him like this before. She wasn't sure what had made the bikers return or why they'd come in the first place, but she knew one thing for certain. They hadn't come to apologize. The warning in the bikers' words lingered in her mind. You don't always get to decide who stays or who goes. It felt like a threat, a subtle, menacing one. Emma shivered, but she didn't let it show. She had to keep it together. She had to stay strong for Max, for her father, and for herself. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, the image of the bikers circled in her mind like vultures, always watching, always waiting. She kept thinking about what the biker with the scar had said. His words echoed in her thoughts, and the fear began to creep back in, faster this time. She lay still in bed, the moonlight casting shadows on the walls. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the sense that something was coming. Something she couldn't control. Around midnight, she heard a noise from downstairs. At first, it was so faint that she thought she imagined it. But then it came again, a soft scrape, like something shifting against the ground. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and she sat up in bed, her heart hammering in her chest. She wasn't sure what it was, but she knew one thing: it wasn't normal. She slowly got out of bed, her bare feet making barely a sound as she crept down the hallway. Max had followed her, silently padding beside her, his ears perked, alert. They both paused at the top of the stairs, straining to listen. The noise came again, a scrape followed by the softest rustle, as if someone was moving outside. Emma's gut twisted with unease. She hadn't heard anyone drive up, but she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, lurking in the shadows. She motioned for Max to stay quiet, and the dog complied, his movements slow and cautious. Emma slowly crept toward the window, her breath shallow, her fingers cold as she lifted the blinds just enough to peer outside. Her eyes scanned the yard, the shadows stretching long across the grass. It was almost impossible to see anything, but there, just past the edge of the driveway, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A figure, a shadowy outline, just barely visible, standing still in the dark. Emma's heart raced, her mind spinning. It wasn't a biker, but it was definitely someone. Someone watching the house. Max's low growl rumbled in his chest, and Emma quickly backed away from the window, her pulse thundering in her ears. Whoever it was didn't seem to be moving, but Emma knew they weren't just passing by. They were waiting, watching. She slowly turned around, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. She wanted to wake her father, but at the same time, she didn't want to alarm him. She wasn't even sure what was happening. Max, sensing her hesitation, stood in front of her, his body taut with tension, his eyes never leaving the window. "What'd we do, boy?" Emma whispered, almost as if asking for his guidance. Max's head tilted slightly, his ears flicking as he took another step closer, his gaze still locked on the window. The figure outside didn't move. Emma tried to steady her breathing, her fingers shaking as she reached for her phone on the nearby desk. She didn't want to call the police, not without knowing what was really going on. But she couldn't just ignore this. Not now. She felt the weight of the situation settle over her. This wasn't a game anymore. The bikers hadn't just been a random nuisance. This was something bigger, something more dangerous. And Emma had no idea what they wanted or why they were watching her house. But she knew one thing for certain: she wasn't alone. Max was by her side, watching over her, just like he always had. But tonight, it felt like that wasn't enough. The figure outside shifted slightly, as if sensing Emma's gaze. For a heartbeat, everything seemed to freeze. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she waited, praying that whoever it was would just go away. But deep down, she knew they weren't leaving. They were just waiting for the right moment. And Emma was certain that moment was coming soon. The figure outside didn't move. The stillness of the moment stretched longer than Emma could bear, each second pressing down on her chest like a weight. Her heart beat loudly in her ears, and Max's low growl, deep and steady, echoed in the quiet of the house. He had never been this tense, this alert before. Emma's hands trembled as she clutched her phone tighter, silently wondering if she should call her father. But the fear of waking him unnecessarily kept her frozen, not wanting to seem overly paranoid. Still, her gut told her something was terribly wrong. The shadow outside shifted again, a small, almost imperceptible movement, but it was enough to send a chill racing down Emma's spine. Whoever it was, they knew she was watching them. The thought made her stomach flip, and she took a step back from the window, almost instinctively moving into the shadows of the hallway. Max's growl escalated into a sharp bark. His stance was firm, his body low to the ground, and his eyes never left the figure. The sound of his bark pierced the quiet night like a warning shot, a sound that should have been heard by anyone nearby. Emma's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't meant for it to come to this. But now, there was no turning back. Without thinking, Emma quickly grabbed her phone and dialed her father's number. The seconds felt like hours as she waited for him to pick up. Finally, the line clicked, and her father's groggy voice came through the receiver. "Emma, what's wrong?" "Dad," Emma whispered urgently, her voice shaking. "Someone's outside. They've been watching the house. I think they're still there." She could hear the shift in his tone as the sleepiness melted away, replaced by concern. "Stay inside. Don't open the door. I'm coming home now. Don't move until I get there, okay?" "Okay, Dad," she whispered, already backing away from the window. Her hand tightened around Max's collar, her heart racing. Max's head was still tilted toward the door, ears perked, every muscle in his body ready to spring into action. "I'll be there soon. Keep your phone with you," her father said before the line went dead. Emma quickly ended the call and slid the phone into her pocket. There wasn't much else she could do, but she knew she had to stay quiet, stay hidden. She motioned for Max to follow her, and together they moved toward the back of the house, away from the windows, away from the view of the figure outside. The floor creaked beneath their feet as they walked, but Emma was careful to move softly. The sound of her own heartbeat felt deafening, each beat a reminder that she wasn't alone in the house anymore, that she wasn't in control. Max stayed close, his body pressed against hers, protective as always. But even he seemed on edge, his ears twitching at every small sound, his eyes constantly darting to the windows and doors. Emma couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted, that whoever was outside had been watching them for days, waiting for the right time. The house felt too quiet. The only noise was the soft rustling of the trees outside and the occasional far-off sound of a car passing on the street. But Emma's senses were heightened. She heard every creak of the house, every breath Max took. She felt like the walls were closing in around her, and it was only a matter of time before the silence would be shattered. Max stopped suddenly, his head tilting toward the back door. His ears flicked, and Emma froze, her body tense with fear. The figure outside hadn't made any noise, but something in the air had shifted. She could feel it too, an electric charge, a danger that had escalated since the biker's last visit. "Max," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "stay close." Max's growl started again, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through the house. Emma's eyes scanned the shadows around her. She could hear footsteps now, soft, cautious, deliberate, coming closer. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to hide anymore. They were getting closer to the house. Her mind raced, but there was no time to think. She needed to get out. To run. She knew she wasn't safe here. Not anymore. The figure outside had made it clear that they were watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before Emma could react, there was a sudden sharp knock on the back door. Her breath caught in her throat. Max's hackles stood on end, and he stepped forward, his eyes locked on the door. The knock was slow, deliberate. It wasn't the kind of knock someone would make by accident. It was a message, a warning. Emma's heart raced as she stood frozen, not knowing whether to run or hide. Her father wasn't home yet. She was alone with Max, and that knock, their presence, felt like it was closing in on her. Then the voice came. Deep, low, cold. You can't hide forever, girl. Emma's stomach dropped. She knew then that this wasn't just about intimidation anymore. It was a threat. The voice at the door sent a wave of panic through Emma. Her legs went weak, but Max remained solid beside her, his growl intensifying, as though he understood the gravity of the situation. Emma's heart was racing. The figure outside had spoken with such a chilling calmness that she knew it wasn't just a random threat. It was a promise. They weren't leaving, not until they had what they wanted. She couldn't breathe. Her fingers clenched around Max's collar, and she felt the weight of the phone in her pocket. Her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, none of which felt clear enough to act on. All she could focus on was the knock, the slow, deliberate rhythm, and the voice that followed. You can't hide forever, girl. Max stepped forward, his body a solid wall between Emma and the door. His growl deepened, resonating through the house, an unmistakable warning to anyone within earshot. But Emma didn't know how much of a warning it was. There was no guarantee that whoever was out there would be intimidated by a dog. Another knock. 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 Emma felt a shiver crawl up her spine. She was trapped. Max was her only protection, but even he couldn't stand up to whatever danger was at the door. She didn't know how many people were out there, or if they were armed, or what their intentions truly were. The silence that followed the knock seemed to stretch forever, like a pause before the storm. Emma glanced at the clock on the wall. Her father still wasn't home. She felt alone in a way she never had before, as though the walls of the house were closing in on her. Her fingers itched to grab the phone, to call her father again, but she knew there was no time. If the situation escalated, every second would count. Max's growl stopped suddenly. Emma froze. The silence was deafening. She held her breath, straining to hear anything. Her heart pounded in her chest as she moved toward the door, inching closer to the small window at the top. She couldn't risk opening the door, not without knowing who was out there. But she needed to see. She needed to understand. Just as she reached for the curtain, she heard it. The unmistakable sound of footsteps. One of the bikers. He was moving to the side of the house. Thud. A heavy boot hitting the ground. Then another. Emma's blood ran cold. They were trying to get inside. They knew she was there. They were coming for her. She quickly moved back, her heart hammering in her chest. Max's body was taut with tension, ready to spring into action. Emma's eyes darted around the room, her mind racing. She couldn't think straight. There was no escape through the back door, no way out unless she confronted them, but the idea of confronting these bikers, especially after everything that had happened, felt terrifying. She needed a plan, but her thoughts were jumbled, the adrenaline clouding her mind. Max barked again, his voice sharp and commanding, cutting through the stillness. His eyes remained fixed on the door as if daring whoever was out there to make a move. Emma quickly scanned the room, her gaze landing on the old broomstick in the corner. It wasn't much, but it would give her something to defend herself with. She grabbed it and held it tightly in her hands, trying to steady her breath. Then there was a noise from the front of the house, a car pulling into the driveway. Dad. Relief flooded through Emma, but it was short-lived. As the sound of the car doors opening reached her ears, the voice at the door returned. You think he can save you? It was the same cold, menacing tone. We're already here. Max growled again, but Emma knew this was the moment. Her father had arrived, and it was their best shot. She quickly moved to the front window, peeking through the blinds just enough to see the headlights of her father's car in the driveway. Her father stepped out of the car, his eyes scanning the street quickly, sensing the tension in the air. The doorbell rang, a loud, persistent sound that echoed through the house. The bikers had made their move. Emma's pulse raced, and she made her way to the door. She was ready to fight, ready to protect herself and Max. But deep down, she knew the confrontation wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Her father, now walking toward the door, would have to make his move. Would he be able to stop them, or would this be the night everything changed? The bikers were waiting. Emma had no more time to hesitate. The moment had come.